In Genesis, we first see mention of God resting on the seventh day. Genesis 2:2 says, "And on the seventh day, God finished his work and what he had done. And he rested on the seventh day from all his work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it God rested from all his work that he had done in creation." So from the beginning, God made a distinction between his work that he had done and the Sabbath, the time that he called holy. But what kind of rest was it for God? And what kind of rest is meant for us? First, let's go ahead and take a look at what kind of rest it was for God. Preparing for this message and looking into the word rest itself, one of my favorite examples that I found was maybe a simplistic view of comparing God resting on the Sabbath to that of a ball in motion coming to a stop. Of course, there are all kinds of scientific reasons why a ball would come to a stop, but for this example, just think about how it simply stops or completes its path. It has completed its movement. To me, this illustrates well how God wasn't resting because he was tired after the completion of the creation, but because his work had come to a close. All his preparation following work over the past 6 days was completed, and behold, it was good. God is the creator of all things, and he is in control. God knows the beginning from the end because he makes it happen. He assures the plan that he has set in motion, a plan that includes you and me joining the family of God. So next, let's take a look at what kind of rest is meant for us. Hebrews 4 verse 9, if you would like to turn there. Hebrews 4 verse 9. Starting in verse 9, it says, "So then there remains a Sabbath rest for the people of God. For whoever has entered God's rest has also rested for his works, as God gives from his. Let us therefore strive to enter that rest, so that no one may fall by the same sort of disobedience." So we must become diligent in seeking God, especially on his Sabbath. But we must not be like the Pharisees and make the Sabbath a burden. In Exodus 20, we see the physical law that God gives to Israel as the fourth commandment. This was a test commandment that Israel practiced for over 40 years in the wilderness and often failed. It is possibly the only commandment that you and I will consistently be tested on every week of our lives. Something to think about. While Israel was told to take a physical rest, the emphasis by God for his people is on entering God's spiritual rest. We must have belief in that rest, something the Israelites had trouble with. God stopped and reflected on the work he had done, just as we must do on the Sabbath day. Pause and view the creation. Think about God and his goodness. The Sabbath is God's day, not yours or mine. It is a time he wants to meet with us, with you and me. It's a time for reading his word, for prayer, for fellowship with other believers, for your family. But most of all, it is a time to be in God's presence. So finally, let's take a look and see how the Sabbath points to a future freedom. The Sabbath, the day God rested, is both the forerunner and weekly reminder of the wonderful future rest, free from the bondage of sin, the millennium and beyond, living in the presence of God. God desires to have a relationship with his people and with all the world. God can get everything ready, but we still have to choose him. We have to move beyond just the physical and look to the future, the ultimate rest that the Sabbath pictures. In Matthew 11, verse 28 through 30, it's Matthew 11, verses 28 through 30. It says, starting in verse 28, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." We have to remember when we wake up that God is the creator. While sleeping, you didn't have to worry about the earth flying off its axis, gravity coming to an end, or the creation falling apart, for God holds up the universe with his power. Even though he rested from the creation on the Sabbath, he keeps it in motion. Similarly, we have to remember it's the same for our personal worries and cares. As mentioned earlier, our yoke, our burden has been placed on Christ. When farming happens with oxen, typically 2 animals would be used, often an older and a younger. The older carrying the larger burden to train and take the brunt of the weight, while the younger gets used to the task and grows. Likewise, our older brother Christ carries our burden as we walk in his way, as we are learning and growing. Psalm 62 verse 5 says, "For God alone, O my soul, wait in silence, for my hope is from him. He only is my rock and my salvation, my fortress. I shall not be shaken. On God rests my salvation and my glory. My mighty rock, my refuge is God." We can put our trust in him, and his plan will be completed. That his plan will be completed. So to summarize, God rested from all his work on the Sabbath. He saw that it was completed, that it was a good work, and that he made man, that he made the Sabbath for man to have rest in him. As we rest physically, we need to also rest from our worries and reflect on the goodness of God and all he does for us. The Sabbath points to God as the creator. The rest we have now physically and spiritually, the future freedom he is offering to each one of us and to the world. I hope everyone has a good Sabbath rest.